Hello, hello. How are you? Let's start. See. Da-da-da-da-da. So I'm going to share screen now. All right. So I'm going to introduce myself first in Chinese, just to practice my Chinese a little bit. 我叫 Hector Sebastian Alvarez，我是阿根廷人，我来自阿根廷。阿根廷在南美洲。第一个我做了我的本科，我的本科是 TEFL 的本科，然后我做了我的硕士，就是 TESOL 的硕士 ，Teaching English as a Second Language，在 Winona State 大学。在 Minnesota，然后我现在我开始我的博士，在马吉尔大学，在蒙特利尔，魁北克，在加拿大。And that's pretty much the extent of my Chinese, and I continue to forget more and more words because now I have to learn French in Quebec. So I'm forgetting my Chinese, and I apologize for that. So as I said, I come from Argentina. I was born and raised in Argentina. I did my bachelor's in Argentina, teaching English as a foreign language. I finished in 2013. I did my master's in TESOL, teaching English as a second language at Winona State University in Minnesota. I finished 2016. And I have started my PhD at McGill University in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I have more than 10 years of experience teaching English as both a foreign language and a second language as well. I've taught in Argentina, in the US, China, and Canada. Specific places where I've taught. In the US, I taught for Concordia Language Villages, which is an entity school connected to Concordia University in Minnesota in the US. While I was in China for a year and a half, I taught, I worked for EF, English First, or Education First, as they are called now. In Chinese, I think they call it Yingfu or Yingfu, something like that. I'm sure some of you might recognize it. And through EF, I worked at Lixin University in Songjiang, which is a university that specializes in accounting in Shanghai. Right now, while I do my PhD, I'm working at YMCA, which is a language school here in Montreal. Nothing too big, but it's a school. And that's enough about myself. Let's start. Before we start, sorry, I actually want to talk about my research interests. So while I do my PhD, some of the things that I'm trying to do research on is research related to native English speaking teachers versus non-native speaking teachers. So there's a lot of debate about things like who is better, a native speaking teacher or a non-native speaking teacher. There are a lot of myths regarding native speakers, like, oh, native speakers are better. They're better teachers. Science and research has demonstrated that that is not the case many times. Native speakers are not necessarily good teachers if they don't know how to teach, especially if they don't know how to teach. I'm also doing research on students, teachers, both native English speaking teachers and non-native English speaking teachers, and recruiters' perceptions, their opinions about native English speaking teachers and opinions on non-native English speaking teachers. So basically, this part is related to understanding what people think about native teachers and non-native teachers. And the last one is native speakerism. Native speakerism means basically, I'm gonna write it down, discrimination against non-native English speaking teachers. This kind of discrimination that I'm trying to do research on is related to the fact that sometimes, if we are really good teachers, but we are not native speakers, some people will think that, oh, you don't have an American passport, you don't have a Canadian passport, you're not a native speaker. That means that you're not a good teacher. And that is wrong and does not make much sense if we think about science, because we need to think about science and research when we talk about these things. It's not just about what people say. So those are my research interests. If you're curious or have any questions about this, feel free to send me an email or send me a message on WeChat. If you want to learn a little bit about this, just let me know. I can recommend you tons of readings about this. And today we're going to have a workshop series related to vocabulary retention. So basically, how to better remember vocabulary. And we're going to see a few ways in which you can better equip your students so that they can remember vocabulary in a different way. That's also better. That will help them better remember this vocabulary. Excuse me. The first part of the workshop series is going to be phrasal verbs. So that's going to be today's workshop. The second workshop is going to be on idioms, which is going to be next workshop. So vocabulary retention on phrasal verbs, both for teachers and students of ESL, EFL. Let's have a look at the itinerary for today. So I'm going to give an introduction to vocabulary retention. So what's needed to fully learn a word, components of a word to know about. So what is it that you need to know about a word in order to be able to use it effectively? I'm going to give an introduction to phrasal verbs, understanding what they mean. We're going to talk about rote memorization, very important. We'll see what this means later. Versus meaningful learning. Why meaningful learning could be more useful than rote memorization. Just to tell you a bit about it. Rote memorization is when we have a list of things and we say, okay, this, and we repeat 100 times until we remember. I'm not saying that it's not useful, but in this workshop we will see a way in which perhaps we can remember and understand things using less rote memorization. The next thing that we're going to talk about is understanding phrasal verbs, the metaphorical meaning of prepositions, different metaphors conveyed by on and off. These are the two types of phrasal verbs, two types of prepositions. with phrasal verbs that we'll see today. We're gonna see some examples. I'm gonna give you some homework for you that you can use for yourself, for your students. So let's move on. So if we look up a word in the dictionary, this is what it looks like, right? So we look up the word discuss, okay? So we see it's a verb, a transitive verb. Here we have its pronunciation, phonemes, and stress here. Here we have its definition, and here we have some examples. And it's very important to have a look at the examples because they help us understand how to better use this word. Here we have, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4 more examples. This is very useful because we can learn when and how to use this word, right? So this is a verb, and here we have the noun discussion, right, which is related to the verb to discuss. And we pretty much have the same things: the type of word, noun, countable, uncountable, pronunciation, meaning, definition, right? Examples, more examples, which are real important. So what do we need to know about a word? So we had a look at some things here in the dictionary. So let's have a look. We need to know the meaning of the word if you want to learn this word. We need to be able to know its pronunciation. We need to have a look at examples because they help us understand when and how to use the word. Something that is not mentioned here, but is very important to know, is register. Is this word formal, neutral, informal? That is very important. Why? Because depending who we are talking to, we're gonna use formal or neutral or informal register. If you don't know what formal is like 正式. So we have formal, informal, the opposite, and we have neutral, right? Formal, informal, neutral, in the middle, right? It's not formal, it's not informal. If we talk to different people, we will use different registers, right? For example, if we are with friends, we might use informal register. If we are having a meeting with other teachers, maybe neutral register or formal register. If we're given a presentation, that's why it's important to know the register of the word or a phrase. For example, we have "how do you do," which is a very formal phrase, which means something very similar to "how are you." How are you is neutral, not informal. Could be a bit informal, but it's not super informal, but it's not formal. How are you? And then we have something really informal that we will not use in a presentation, which is "what's up?" What's up? Real informal, right? Then the other thing we need to know is how to use the word, right? So we need to know the verb, not the verb, the word pattern, how it works, right? So, for example, someone discusses something, right? We have the subject, the verb, and here we have the object, the something, right? For example, we have someone discusses something with someone, right? We can use with, preposition with here. Or someone and here this is why it's useful to learn how to use a word, because for example we cannot say someone discusses about something. That's wrong. Um, so we need to know that. And if we have enough examples, we will know that about is not used with discuss, right? And something very useful to know when you're learning a word is, does it have any synonyms, right? Synonyms are similar words, right? For example, we can say, we have the word talk. Is there any synonym to talk? Maybe we can say, oh, chat could be similar. It's not exactly the same, maybe where they are different registers, but talk and chat, they mean, blah, 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 right? We could say, oh, chatter, More informal, maybe it means something a bit more different, but it also means blah, blah, blah. Maybe chatter has slightly different, a slightly different meaning, someone who talks too much, or maybe talks about unimportant things, right? But it's important to know synonyms because instead of explaining the word in Chinese, perhaps you can try synonyms to see if your students know the synonyms. If a student asks you, what is teacher, what is chat? You can tell your student, okay, so chat is like talk, but maybe a bit more informal, right? Just a teeny bit more informal, right? When we are learning a word, if we decide to learn a word, it's important to know its frequency. We need to know if it's a common word or a rare word, perhaps if your students are beginners or intermediate, you don't want to give them rare words because they might not be important for them. You want to give them a lot of common words, right? And as they become more proficient and more advanced, you can start giving them rare words, right? For example, here we have a very common word, ask, very common. And here we have a very rare word, beseech, which is not very common. You might find it in the literature, in kind of like more classic literature. Beseech means ask or beg, right? But it's not rare. So if we see this word, probably we don't need our students to learn this word because they will not need it. They will not use it. They will not see it, right? So it's important to know the word's frequency, especially when we want to learn it. Am I learning a useful word, common word? Am I learning a very rare word that is not going to be useful for me? We need to think about that, right? Because if it's not useful, then we might be wasting our time. And finally, we need to know about a word's connotation. When we say word, does it have a negative connotation, a positive connotation, or a neutral connotation? Let me give you an example. For example, we have here well-known, which has a positive connotation, and notorious, which has a negative connotation. Basically, these two mean that someone, a lot of people know this person for good things, or a lot of people know this person for bad things. Usually when it's especially notorious, it's bad things. Well-known could be positive or neutral in a way, right? But notorious is usually negative. People know you because you did something bad. So we need to know the connotation, right, of the word, because if we make a mistake, we could offend some people. Excuse me. Now, so let's go into learning the words. So depending on the words that we're gonna learn, we're gonna have different techniques. So we're gonna use different techniques or activities depending on different types of words. And there are different ways to organize this. We can organize groups of words to learn based on lexical type, like nouns, verbs, adjectives, etc., or by theme, topic, or idiomatic expressions, or phrasal verbs, etc. We can pretty much organize words in different ways. So, excuse me. Today we're going to talk about phrasal verbs, and next time, idiomatic expressions, not today. So today we're going to talk about phrasal verbs and how to teach them. Let's move on to the next slide. Phrasal verbs. Let's have a look at some phrasal verbs, right? For example, please take that picture off the wall. Peter took off his clothes and got into the shower. The plane took off at 5 from Chicago Airport, and it's heading to China. Peter put on his clothes and took off from home. Peter started his new company. At first it was difficult, but his project finally took off last year. Prices for houses were really low in Montreal, but they took off last year. Now the cheapest house is $20 million. Now, let's have a look at all these examples here, okay? I want you to think, what do they have in common? All these sentences with phrasal verbs. I'll give you a few seconds. 5. No? Did you notice that all these sentences have phrasal verb take off in different tenses? Take off, took off, right? But it's the same phrasal verb. However, that doesn't mean that this word, this phrasal verb, means the same in all these sentences. It doesn't, in fact. This one phrasal verb, take off, has maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different meanings in 6 different sentences, right? And the first thing that we think is like, oh my God, it's one phrasal verb, take off, with 6 meanings. How can we learn, how can we learn how to use this, or how can we learn its meaning, how to recognize it? Well, the first thing that you have to pay attention to is context, the sentence, right? What information are we getting from the sentence, right? So that we know the meaning of this phrasal verb. Now, when it comes to the specific meaning of this phrasal verb, we have 2 options. I'm going to show you the first option. The first option, as many of maybe your colleagues do, or not, but I know some teachers who do. The first option is to take the phrasal verb, take off, and give it all the possible definitions, sorry, give it all the possible definitions in Chinese. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different words in Chinese, right? Which in a way, if you have a look at 1 and 2 here, take off, took off. So in these 2 sentences, maybe there is some connection, right? We have xia, and here we have xia again, right? Okay, so you might say, okay, there is some connection, but here we have took off with the plane, right? And we have qi fei, which is a completely different phrase, and it has really no relation with xia here, right? It's a completely different expression. And well, here you can see that again, very different expressions, right? What I will try to do today is to try to convince you to think about this in a different way, okay? I'm not saying that that translation is useless, but I will show you a way that I think will be more effective. I think that if you decide to apply the way that I'm going to teach today, it might be a bit more efficient than learning 6 different definitions or translations of the phrasal verb take off. So now let's have a look at this in English, right? One way to have a look at this also is to understand what each phrasal verb means in English directly, right? Please take that picture off the wall, and that is very literal, right? So we take the picture off the wall, and here we have another definition: get undressed. So the plane goes up and leaves. Here just means leave. Here means become successful. Here means increase. So you will see that perhaps here in English there is some connection with leave and leave here, maybe. There's another way perhaps to learn it, right? If you know these words, perhaps you can learn or you can teach the definitions of these phrasal verbs using these in English. And in a way, I would say that this might help because if you start learning English using English, basically it's like you're training your brain a little bit more, right? When you learn English using English only, you're making more of an effort with your brain. But if you get used to doing this, then everything will become much easier in the future. I'm not saying do not translate. I'm not saying do not use a bilingual dictionary, but if you know these words like get undressed, and then you use a monolingual dictionary and you find this for take off, then you're already training your mind, right? If you use a bilingual dictionary, then you will read something in Chinese, and in a way you're giving less training to your brain. That is one thing, right? However, I will say again that this is not necessarily the most effective way to learn phrasal verbs. It's not the most effective. It can be used, and it might work, you know, if you have students who understand the word increase, become successful, leave, then you can explain, you can tell them, oh, take off here is like leave, right? Leave. And they will understand. But there's another way too. Because here, when you learn like this, you're also using rote memorization, you know, like took off, get undressed, took off, plane goes up and leaves, took off, leave, took off, become successful, took off, increase, right? So you're still memorizing things, right? And we are trying to go beyond rote memorization, okay? Why am I saying that meaningful learning can be a bit better than rote memorization? Usually with rote memorization, a few things happen. First one, it can be really boring, extremely boring, right? So when you're reading a list, you know, like take off this, it's boring. It's monotonous, which is a synonym to boring. It's all the time the same thing. Students might remember this for the exam, for sure, but it doesn't mean that they will remember that after the exam, okay? When we learn in a meaningful way, students are more likely to remember what they learn, because there is meaning. It's significant. They learned something and they invested their emotions, right? They did it in a way that was not monotonous, that was not necessarily super boring. So let me read you a quote, but some scholars. Information that is processed in an insightful way, for example, through a problem-solving task, is more likely to be retained in long-term memory than information that is processed at a shallow level. For example, through blind memorization. So blind memorization and rote memorization are the same. Shallow level. Shallow level means not deep. So when you are memorizing like this, it's not very deep learning. However, if you learn in a more meaningful way, through like a problem-solving task, you know, actually using your brain, right, to learn about something, you will remember that better, okay? The more effort we use when we try to understand things, the better that we will remember. If we are given everything like this, you know, like this, you know, we ask our teachers, what is take off? What is it like? For example, we have here, what is take off here, right? And the teacher says something like, na xiao, right? Oh, okay, well, very easy. Take off here, na xiao. Okay, good. But it's too easy, and our brain doesn't need to make an effort to learn it, right? And then our teacher says, okay, this one is na xiao. Now read it 100 times, okay, so that you remember. Na xiao, na xiao, na xiao, na xiao. It's not the most effective way, based on research. If your teacher tells you, you know, like you don't know what takeoff is, and your teacher is like, okay, let's think about it, you know? What do you think? You have a picture here, take it off the wall, and then you use your brain, you start thinking, okay, so he just did this. Oh, okay, that's what it means. So then you need to use your brain a little bit more. The more you put your brain to work, the more effort you make, the more chances that you will remember the new vocabulary that you learn. So learning vocabulary in meaningful ways improves the chances of retaining it more effectively. So in order to learn in a meaningful way, to learn phrasal verbs in a meaningful way, we need to have a look at metaphor. What is a metaphor first? Here's the definition. An expression that describes a person or object by referring to something that is considered to possess similar characteristics. This is the definition from the online Cambridge Dictionary. So basically a metaphor is when we are comparing something to something else. We're saying that this is similar to this, right? Let me give you an example of a metaphor. Peter has a heart of stone. Here we have a clear metaphor. So I think there is a very close metaphor like this in Chinese, when someone has a heart of stone. This metaphor is comparing a heart to a stone. Now let's think about this. Why is it comparing this heart to stone? Let's think about the characteristics of a stone. A stone is hard, tough, doesn't have emotions, right? So, okay, this person's heart doesn't have emotions, doesn't have love, is tough, right? So basically that's a metaphor. We're comparing something to something else. So Peter's heart has no emotions. That is why it's similar to a stone, right? And the first thing that we need to learn about phrasal verbs is prepositions. Prepositions are fundamental to understand phrasal verbs. The first preposition that we're gonna have a look at is preposition on. Okay. So there are two layers when you're learning prepositions. Okay. The first layer to understanding prepositions is the literal meaning, the more concrete meaning. The other layer to understanding prepositions is the metaphorical meaning. Okay. So to understand the literal meaning of off, we need to understand on first, right? So we're gonna have a look at on before having a look at off. For example, literally, a ball is on the table, right? So on the table. Pictures are on the wall, right? So contact there. And we need to know that on and off are opposites, right? On, off, right? Positive, negative, they're opposites. So let's have a look at off. Let's have a look at the literal meaning of preposition off. And when I say literal, this is literal meaning of preposition off. For example, the ball falls off the table. So before it was on, now it's off, right? On, off, right? The picture falls off the wall, or I took the picture off the wall. Again, on, off, right? The literal meaning we see here with off is that of separation, okay? On, contact. Off, separation. On, contact. Off, separation. Why is it so important to know this concept of separation? This concept of separation will help us understand all phrasal verbs, all the phrasal verbs that we've seen today, okay? Instead of learning 6 definitions or 6 translations, we will learn one concept, and we will see how this concept works in different ways, okay? So we're gonna start talking about, so we said literal and metaphor, right? So we're gonna start now with off, not so much in the literal sense, but more in like the metaphorical sense, little by little. So we have to apply the concept of separation to all the phrasal verbs we had talked about before. For example, the plane took off at 5 from Chicago Airport and it's heading to China. So here we have, if you have a look at the plane, we have off, right? So we have the ground, we have off the ground, so ground, off the ground, separation again, okay? Off the ground. So it's very important that we remember this separation concept, right? Let's talk about the other examples. Peter started his new company. At first it was difficult, but his project finally took off last year. So this is the important thing, okay? We have off again, we have separation in a way. Why? This is like the plane in a way, the plane example. We have the bottom or the ground, right? Here at the bottom ground is no success, right? That's how people think, you know, in some countries, you know. So in order to understand this, we need to think ground, bottom, right? No success. But when the project takes off, separation again. When there is separation, right? It's about, sometimes it's about going up, right? In the air, like the plane. So going up means success, right? Going up, success, separation, right? And if we think about the price example, prices for houses were really low, like here they were really low, right? The bottom, the ground, 10,000, like 10,000 American dollars, very cheap. But they took off last year, right? So they were here, very cheap. They took off. Separation again, going up, more expensive, right? Going up, more expensive. So these are ways in which we can interpret the metaphor, right? The off preposition. Why is it important that we understand what off means? It's important because if we understand what the preposition off means, we will better remember it, okay? We will remember its separation, okay? And why is it so useful? Because we can apply this technique, this mnemonic technique, this memorization technique with many different prepositions, okay? So if we remember that off means separation, okay, then maybe we can apply this idea to other phrasal verbs that have off, right? Or we can apply this same idea to other prepositions to learn them, right? To know what they mean. Now, I think it's very important to understand what a metaphor like this is, because in a way, native speakers think like this. They don't know they think in this way, but because of culture, right? We think in different ways, right? Because of culture. And we have metaphors, different metaphors in different cultures that mean different things, right? For example, in the Western cultures, right, going forward, right, means the future. Going back means the past. But in Chinese, or in Chinese culture, right, the past is more related to sheng, like up, right? And the future is more related to xia, which is different from Western cultures. My point being is that if we understand a little bit how people who speak English think, so they think in this way, then we will be able to use this same knowledge that we're learning here to other phrasal verbs, to other expressions, okay? If we only use translation and we don't try to understand the way people think, why they think that way, it's gonna be more difficult because you will have to memorize a lot of expressions. And if you don't know why they work like that, it's more probable that you will forget them, right? I mean, the example I gave, sheng, xia, is just one little example, right? But thinking in that way helped me a lot when I was learning Chinese, you know, thinking about what the characters mean, right? Although my Chinese is very, very basic, but thinking in this way helped me to understand a little bit better. Now, we're gonna talk about preposition on, which is the opposite to off, right? So, here we have the ball is on the table, 在 blah 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 上 We are on the train, bus, metro, die, chu, chu, chu. That is bus. um, oh no, that is not bus. That's taxi. I'm sorry. On the train, bus, metro, die, blah blah blah. I woke up, put on my clothes, and went to school. So you see that in some cases, there are some connections with on and sheng, right? That's because we're talking about maybe literal meaning. But as soon as we start getting into more metaphorical meaning, words start to change a lot, and we have very different translations. And we don't have sheng here. My car works on solar energy, petrol. Here we have yong, which means something like use, right? And you can use it in English, but we cannot, like, we cannot think of a precise translation, right? The other thing about translating is if we try to translate everything many times, we will find that the translations are not precise, okay? Translations are many times not very precise, especially with English and Chinese that are very different languages, right? So there are different ways of expressing. So if you learn all the translations, it doesn't mean that you're actually learning this expression and what it means, right? If you're learning the translation, it's like learning English through a Chinese lens, okay? And what I want you to do here to understand on, I want you to be able to put your English lenses to understand English. If you use English lenses to understand English, you will be able to use this knowledge. The knowledge that we're learning today, you'll be able to use it to learn other things in English. Whereas when you have a translation, you learn this, but you're not able to apply this translation to learn more things in English. So that is another advantage to learning English using English. Anyways, here we have all the examples, right? As you will see, we are using preposition on. Here on, we have put on, went on, survive on. So here we have many different phrasal verbs that use on, right? In this case, it's not one phrasal verb. We have the preposition on, alone, and here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 phrasal verbs, different phrasal verbs that use the preposition on. And we will try to understand what they have in common. So, so here we will see that there are some concepts, right, in common in a way with on here. We start with the literal meaning again. The ball is on the table, right? We are on the train, bus, metro. So we're on the train. Here, this is me on the train, the bus, metro. And this is when it starts getting more metaphorical, right? I woke up, put on my clothes, and went to school, right? Put on. Peter took a break and then went on working on his homework. It's difficult to survive on one sandwich a day. My car works on solar energy, petrol. I rely on my parents for financial support. So you will see that there is a few common concepts here. On, of course, on means, as we said, contact, right? There's contact. That's one thing. To put on my clothes, right? To put on, take off, right? Contact, close. Contact, take off, separation, right? This one's very straightforward in a way. Here starts getting a bit more metaphorical. Peter took a break and then went on working on his homework. Means to continue, right? Here, it's difficult to survive on one sandwich a day. Support. Why? It's a good question. All these on here mean support. My car works on solar energy. Petrol, support. I rely on my parents for financial support, right? So why do we have support here? It's difficult to survive on one sandwich a day. Think about this, right? This is us. This is our body, right? How do we support our body so that we don't die? We need many things to support our body. One of those things is food, right? So food supports our body so that we don't die, right? That's one thing. This is kind of like the same. My car works on solar energy. So this is the car, kind of. This is the car. How is the car supported? With solar energy or petrol. I depend on my parents for financial support. Here we have a university student. How does he get his support? His parents, right? His parents' money, right? So as we can see, there is one concept here that relates to on, right? And here we have another one. Here we have another one. We see here that instead of using 3 different translations, we can just think of the concept support, 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 right? It's one idea versus 3 translations. That means that you will need to use less memory capacity in a way. It will be easier to learn because you need to learn one idea, which you can later on continue using to learn about other phrasal verbs, right? Because there will be other phrasal verbs that are related to support too, related to on, right? Again, as I said before, in its basic, most literal meaning, on relates to the word support, contact, or support, right? This support can be concrete, as I said. The ball is on the table. We are on the train, bus, metro. I woke up, put on my clothes, and went to school. Contact, right? Contact, as I said. In its abstract sense, it relates to the concept of continue, support, as I said, etc. Peter took a break and went on working on his homework. Continue, right? I'm hungry. It's difficult to survive on one salad or sandwich a day. I'm a bit tired. I'm on 2 hours of sleep today, right? So we not only can we use on for food, but we can use it for sleep too, right? So that's important. That's why examples are important, because we think, okay, what can support us when we speak English, right? What phrases can we use? Okay, sleep can support us. Okay, food can support us, right? So, I cannot live on one sandwich, or I cannot. I'm on 2 hours sleep, so I'm very tired, right? My car works on solar energy. I depend and rely on parents for financial support. So all these ideas with on are related to support on the metaphorical level. And here I want to show you some ideas on how to present this in class. A few interesting pictures to describe the metaphors, right? this is a way in which you can present it in class, right? Pictures are very important so that students can understand the metaphor, you know, how the native speaker thinks. If we learn to think the way native speakers think, then we might be able to speak in a more natural way and even make fewer mistakes sometimes. You cannot live a healthy life one sandwich a day, right? And I think you know what preposition it is, right? Look at that. Support, our body, and support, right? On, right? This is our sandwich support. Another picture. Peter is so lazy. He doesn't work, but lives his parents' money, resources, right? Support, again, support, as you can see, on. Tesla cars run. So you see again, support on, right? On solar energy. So what have we learned so far? We've learned so far that we have prepositions with phrasal verbs, and it's very important to understand what the preposition means, right? Because I think it's easier to understand what the verb means. Take, put, right? Very straightforward. But the important thing is the preposition. On can mean support, can mean to continue, can mean contact, right? Off can mean separation or leaving, right? So this is another thing that you can do with your students. Construct a concept map so that they remember, okay, on is support, continue, contact, right? And excuse me. And when you're teaching this, especially when you're doing contact or separation, especially when you have younger kids, it's very important to use body language, right? Well, I've been teaching for now like the past 30 minutes, I think. I've been using my body language as much as I can with the constraints that I have, you know, this little square here. But I've been trying to say, you know, contact, separation, contact, separation. And that's something really nice that you can do with the students. You know, like, okay, when I say contact, contact. Okay, separation, contact, right? And you can play games with that. You know, contact, okay, separation, okay, right? Support, okay, continue, right? Living. So the students can access the language directly in English, right? And in a fun, kind of like in a more fun, meaningful environment. So I'm gonna go back to this. Why is it useful to learn phrasals in this way? Well, first, as I said, if you learn to think in this way, rather than just by translating, you will get a deeper understanding of the culture and language and how they work together, okay? Understanding the culture is fundamental, right? As well as the language. And this will be extremely important for our second workshop. So keep that in mind. All this knowledge that we're learning today will be extremely useful to learn more of this kind of vocabulary, right? So I can promise you, you're not wasting your time by learning prepositions this way, phrasal verbs this way. Why? First, you will learn more phrasal verbs. You can apply the same technique. Okay, so what is the concept, right, behind this phrasal verb, right? If we think of other phrasal verbs. And when you see a new phrasal verb, maybe this phrasal verb is related to support, contact, separation. So you don't need to learn a new translation. You can just say, okay, I have support, and it goes with this phrasal verb, right? It goes with so you can you can just extend one of your current definitions to a new word, and that's it. If you learn all this, as I said, if you learn all the phrasal verbs through translations, perhaps you will get faster definitions. That is true of phrasal verbs. But this knowledge in translation cannot be used to learn other phrasal verbs. Okay, that's one important thing that I want to say. When you learn through translation, that knowledge will not be useful for the future. This knowledge that we just saw now will be useful for the future. You will keep that and you will reuse it every time you learn a new phrasal verb. And you will see that when I give you your homework, all right? Okay, just a second. Okay. How to teach this to your students? Well, in a way, you could carry a similar presentation as I've done here. Visuals are extremely important to show the metaphors, okay? So the pictures that I showed you here or here are very useful. They explain the metaphor. Brief explanations with easy language, that's good, that helps, that's important. Do not hesitate to use body language. It's very useful. Sometimes body language can help us to avoid using, you know, our native language, right? So that we can use more English, okay? We can group metaphors by type, right? We can group metaphors by support metaphors or continue metaphors, right? We can group them by type. What else? And it's very important that we give lots of examples so that students know when, where, and how to use those phrasal verbs, okay, and idioms. I'm just gonna stop the sharing just for a second because I want to check something. I want to check that I have your homework. I do have your homework. Yes, that's good. I am going to share again. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to give you some homework that you could also use with your students. So first, I'm going to give you, replace the following verbs using phrasal verbs or prepositions. So I'm giving you continue, leaving, common phrases. And what you need to do here is replace them with phrasal verbs. And here, what is the meaning of the following phrasal verbs? Okay, as you will see here, we haven't seen these phrasal verbs. We haven't. But what I want you to do here is to apply the metaphor of the prepositions. Okay, so when you do this homework, keep this in mind. What are the meanings? You know that, okay, with on we have support, continued contact, right? So what can this mean, right? Read the sentence, think about the preposition, off here, on, I think you know the verb dream, I think you know the verb read, you know falling, I think you know all of them. So you only need to think of the preposition, what the concept is, okay? Here are the references. These are the books, some of the sources that I used to prepare my presentation. If you would like to have for me to provide you with these materials, shoot me an email or get in touch with Terry or Joe, and we'll get this to you. Don't worry. One little disclaimer, okay, about translation. I'm not saying that translation is useless. So that's the first thing I want to say before I finish. We must not forget that translation is still a useful tool. However, if we use it too much, we get used to seeing English only through our first language, right? So you only get used to seeing English through Chinese lens, right? Or in my case, if I use too much translation, I get used to thinking, you know, in Spanish and then using English, and it makes everything a bit complicated sometimes. We should aim at being able to see English through an English lens as much as we can, okay? Because that will help us train our brains to use a bit more English inside, okay? Translation is particularly useful for instances when students do not understand a word that is not part of the content we aim to teach this lesson. So if a student wants to know about a word that is not part of the lesson, and you know, instead of spending 5 minutes explaining that word, you can just tell them in Chinese, right? So there's still big use, you know, for translation and being able to speak your students L1, right? For example, if a student does not know words, the word sales in the example sales took off, right? We can tell them what sales means in Chinese, since explaining sales is not the focus of our lesson, right? It's not part of the lesson. And we do not want to spend much time explaining that item. However, when explaining take off, we want our students to understand its metaphorical meaning beyond a simple translation, right? So we're trying to avoid translation for takeoff because we want to learn the concept, right, behind off. To understand the deep meaning of this phrasal verb, take off, or preposition on, we must see beyond translation directly into English. So that's going to be the end of this presentation. I hope you found it useful. Thank you very much for watching. Your feedback will be greatly appreciated. Please feel free to give any comments, any type of constructive feedback. Please let Joe and or Terry know what things you would like to learn in future workshops. Do your homework and get ready. Get questions ready for the Q&A. Okay. I want to say thanks here. Thanks to Terry's English Lab, aka Tian Tian Yingyu, and thanks to Wish and Do, aka Wei Shu. I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity that you gave me to give this workshop to the teachers. And I'll see you soon in the Q&A. And if you decide to continue, there are more workshops to come. Idioms is going to be the next workshop, so stay tuned. Thank you very much, and have a good day.